I was leaving work late one night, around 1 a.m., and my office parking garage was nearly empty, silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead and the distant echo of my footsteps on concrete. And at first, I felt a small sense of unease, but nothing major, just the usual feeling you get when walking alone in a vast empty structure. But that unease turned to fear almost immediately when I noticed a figure standing near my car, motionless, tall, dark, and completely still, staring in my direction. And when I squinted, I realized I didn't see any features, just a shadowy outline, too dark against the dim light, too still to be normal. I paused, telling myself it was someone waiting for a friend, someone else leaving late. But the moment I tried to move, the figure seemed to shift slightly, closer, faster than any human could, and a chill ran down my spine because the echo of its movement didn't match the sound of footsteps. It was silent, deliberate, and precise, almost as if it glided across the concrete. I forced myself to walk faster, keys clutched tightly in my hand, flashlight from my phone barely illuminating the space ahead, but I kept feeling the weight of eyes on my back, the sense that something was circling me, always just out of reach, and the figure seemed to vanish and reappear as I passed the rows of empty cars, always ahead of me, always just at the edge of my vision. My heart pounded as I reached my car, unlocking it and fumbling with my seatbelt. But when I looked up again, the shadow was suddenly in the back seat, crouched low, and I froze, convinced my mind was playing tricks on me. But the air grew icy cold, and I felt the presence lean over me, though there was no one there physically, and the sound of soft, wet breathing filled the space, though no one else was in the garage. I slammed the doors and started the engine, lights piercing the darkness, but when I tried to drive away, I noticed that all the exits seemed farther than they should be, and the garage had transformed, seemingly infinite, rows of concrete pillars stretching endlessly, and I could see shadowy figures in every aisle, moving just at the edges, some standing still, some gliding silently along the walls, whispering my name, their breath cold on my neck despite the locked doors. And I realized with a terror that the garage itself wasn't empty, and whatever haunted it could move through shadows, walls, and the very space itself, patient, watching, waiting. By the time I finally reached the street and the garage behind me seemed normal again, I was shaking, breathless, and even now, months later, whenever I walk through a dimly lit parking structure, I feel the same oppressive gaze, hear faint whispers that seem too close to ignore, and I know that some places, like that garage, hold something lurking in the shadows, something that isn't human, that waits for the next lone soul foolish enough to enter. I had just finished a late shift at the downtown office and headed to the multi-level parking garage, the place eerily quiet, almost too quiet, with only the dim glow of overhead fluorescent lights reflecting off the polished concrete floors. And at first, I thought it was normal. Late nights were always like this. But as I descended the ramp to the lower levels, I felt a strange, suffocating presence, as if someone, or something, was watching me from the shadows, and I could see movement at the edge of my vision, flickers of dark shapes disappearing when I tried to focus on them. I told myself it was my imagination, maybe the shadows of structural pillars. But when I reached my car, parked in the farthest corner of level B3, I noticed the first truly unsettling thing. My car wasn't where I left it. Not only that, but the row of cars beside it seemed subtly altered, like the entire garage had shifted, pillars in slightly different places, paint marks on the ground that didn't line up, and the exit signs, which I knew led back to the street, appeared to recede, further and farther away. As I approached my car, the temperature dropped suddenly, my breath visible in the dim light, and I heard it, the faint scrape of shoes against concrete, slow, deliberate, and circling me, though the garage was supposed to be empty. And when I turned to look down the aisles, I saw shadows moving in unnatural ways, stretching across the walls, pooling into shapes that looked human, but impossible, limbs bending wrong, heads tilting too far, as if they were watching, studying, waiting. Panic gripped me, and I fumbled with my keys, unlocking the door. But when I glanced back at the aisle, I saw a figure crouched on top of a car across from mine, featureless, entirely black. its presence pressing against my chest even though it was distant, and it moved impossibly fast, vanishing from one spot and appearing in another without sound. I jumped into the car and tried to start the engine, but it stuttered, refusing to turn over, and all the lights above me flickered violently, plunging the garage into near total darkness, and I could hear whispers, low and guttural, echoing off the concrete walls, calling my name, circling me, coming from every direction at once, but I couldn't locate their source. I felt a cold pressure at my side, as if a hand was resting on the car door, though no one was there, and the shadows outside seemed to stretch impossibly long, bending around corners, gliding silently along the ceiling, always moving, always patient, waiting for a misstep. Hours, or maybe minutes, passed in that frozen nightmare, and when the garage finally returned to its normal, mundane layout as I finally got the engine to start and sped toward the exit, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been watched the entire time, that some part of that parking garage had been alive, observing me, and that as long as I kept driving, it would remain patient, silent, and waiting for the next lone soul to enter its endless echoing concrete maze. I was leaving a late-night event downtown, the streets empty and silent, and as I descended into the underground parking garage, the fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, casting long, jagged shadows across the concrete, and the first thing I noticed was how empty it felt. Eerily, oppressively empty, as if the space itself were holding its breath, waiting, watching. And though I told myself it was normal for this time of night, unease coiled in my stomach as I walked toward my car on level C4, far from the entrance. I had parked near a row of pillars, and as I approached, I noticed a figure leaning against one of them, perfectly still, dark, featureless, almost blending into the shadow, and when our eyes, or whatever counted as eyes, met, I felt a chill that seemed to seep into my bones, as if the air itself had grown cold and heavy around me. I quickened my pace, keys in hand, but every time I glanced over my shoulder, I saw movement, shadows stretching and bending unnaturally, shapes darting across aisles too quickly to be human, gliding silently along walls, and when I looked straight ahead, the figure that had been against the pillar had vanished, only to reappear atop a car several spaces away, crouched low, watching me, waiting. My heart raced as I unlocked my car, fumbling to get inside, and then the lights above me flickered violently and went out, plunging the garage into a near black void, and I heard whispers, low, guttural, indistinct, echoing off the concrete walls, circling me from every direction, repeating my name in a way that made my chest tighten, my stomach twist, and my legs tremble, and I could feel a cold presence pressing against the side of the car, heavy, patient, impossibly close, though nothing was physically there. I slammed the doors, started the engine, and tried to escape, but the garage seemed to stretch endlessly, the ramps and pillars rearranging themselves in impossible ways, corners bending beyond logic, aisles looping back on themselves, and the shadows moved with an intelligence I couldn't comprehend, always at the edge of my vision, gliding along walls, pooling in corners, forming humanoid shapes that tilted their heads unnaturally, as if judging me. The whispers grew louder, closer, now forming guttural phrases I couldn't understand, and I realized with a growing sense of horror that the garage itself was alive, feeding on fear, shaping the space around me to trap me, to torment me. And even when I finally burst out into the open street, leaving the garage behind, I could still feel its presence, lingering in the shadows, patient, waiting. And even now, months later, whenever I walk through a dimly lit parking structure, I feel the same oppressive gaze, hear faint whispers echoing through empty levels, and I know that some parking garages aren't just empty concrete. They're living, patient, and hungry, and they wait for the next person foolish enough to be alone after dark. The shadows never truly leave, and sometimes, late at night, I hear the scraping of footsteps that match my own, though I am miles away.